Today, right this moment, we are starting a new era in the century-old brand.
Because this is where everything started in 1909 with Ettore Bugatti.
Our production location in Veliko Trgovište, half an hour away from our headquarters in Sveta Nedelja.
Imagine your parent company of almost 30 years suddenly walks away. No warning, no scandal, just gone. That's exactly what's happening to Bugatti right now, as Porsche sells its entire stake and ends a Volkswagen-backed era that produced the Veyron and the Chiron. But instead of slowing down, Bugatti just opened La Manufacture, a brand new factory in Molsheim built for the Tourbillon, a sold-out, open 1,800 horsepower hybrid hypercar.
It's full 1,800 horsepower, and there's also a fully electric EV mode.
Nobody's even driven yet. New owners, new factory, new flagship, all happening in the same few months. Is this the start of Bugatti's boldest chapter, or its riskiest bet yet? Let's break it down together. The end of an era. To understand how big this moment actually is, you have to go back to where the modern version of Bugatti even came from. Because this isn't a company with an unbroken history stretching back 100 years. It's a brand that was resurrected. Bugatti, as most people know it today, the maker of 1,000-horsepower hypercars with price tags that read like phone numbers, didn't exist in any meaningful sense for decades. The original company faded after the Second World War. It sat dormant, a legendary name with nobody building anything under it. That changed in 1998, when Volkswagen bought the rights to the Bugatti name and decided to bring it back from nothing. Everything that followed, the Veyron, the car that redefined what a road car could do, and later the Chiron, which pushed that same formula even further.
This is the Bugatti Chiron Persport. One of the most expensive Bugattis ever made.
Happened because Volkswagen was willing to bankroll a project that made very little conventional business sense on paper. Building a car that expensive, in numbers that small, is not how you run a normal profitable division. It's how you build a halo brand. And Volkswagen understood that trade-off from day one. For over 2 decades, that arrangement held. Bugatti got the deep pockets of one of the largest car manufacturers on Earth. Volkswagen got the prestige of owning the fastest, most extreme production car in the world, whenever headlines needed it. It worked because both sides were getting something they couldn't easily get anywhere else. Then, in 2021, the structure shifted. Instead of sitting directly under Volkswagen, Bugatti was folded into a new joint venture called Bugatti Rimac, combining the historic French hypercar maker with Rimac Group, the Croatian company known for building some of the most advanced electric hypercars and EV technology on the planet. Porsche took a 45% stake in this new joint venture. Rimac Group held the remaining 55%. On paper, it was a genuinely clever pairing. Bugatti's heritage and craftsmanship combined with Rimac's cutting-edge electric and software expertise, all still connected back to Volkswagen through Porsche's ownership stake. That's the arrangement that's now ending, completely. Porsche has agreed to sell its entire 45% stake in Bugatti Rimac. And separately,
Porsche will divest its 45% stake in Bugatti Rimac, the joint venture set up in 2021.
Its 20.6% stake in the broader Rimac Group, to a brand new consortium. The transaction agreements were signed on April 24, 2026, and the deal is currently working through the usual regulatory approvals before it can officially close, which is expected to happen before the end of this year. Once that happens, Porsche's active ownership role in Bugatti is over. Not reduced, not restructured, over. And with it, the nearly 30-year thread connecting Bugatti back to the Volkswagen Group finally snaps. Think about what that actually means for a brand like this. Bugatti has never, in its modern form, existed as a truly independent company making its own decisions, without a massive industrial parent standing behind it, ready to cover the bill when a project ran over budget or a car took years longer to develop than planned. That safety net is what's disappearing here. Whatever comes next, Bugatti is walking into it, without the company that built its second life standing directly behind it anymore. Which naturally raises the obvious question. If this relationship worked for so long, why is Porsche the one choosing to walk away from it now? Why Porsche walked away? Here's where it's worth being very precise, because it's tempting to look at a headline like "Porsche exits Bugatti" and assume there's some juicy, scandal-driven story underneath it. There isn't. The real explanation is a lot more mundane, and honestly, a lot more revealing about the state of the car industry in general right now. Porsche has been having a genuinely rough stretch. According to reporting from Reuters, the company's profitability took a sharp hit through 2025 and into 2026.
Porsche projecting sales of up to $39 billion this year, margins of over 25%. That is massive in the car world.
Driven by a mix of pressures that have nothing specifically to do with Bugatti at all. Demand in China, historically one of the most important markets for premium and luxury vehicles, has weakened significantly. Porsche's push toward electric vehicles has also been running slower than the company originally planned, with combustion models in some lineups actually continuing to outsell their electric counterparts by a wide margin, even in markets where the electric version has been available for a while. Layer on top of that a broader restructuring effort across the entire company, and you get a business that's actively looking for places to cut costs and free up capital, not places to keep investing in side projects. That's the real context behind this sale. It isn't a reaction to any single controversy or any specific story about Bugatti's reputation. It's a much bigger, much more boring financial story. A major manufacturer under real pressure, narrowing its focus back toward its core business, and shedding stakes in ventures that, however prestigious, aren't central to keeping the main company profitable. Porsche selling its Bugatti Rimac stake sits in exactly the same category as other recent moves the company has made to trim spending and refocus, stepping back from ventures outside its core lineup in order to protect the business that actually pays the bills. And to be clear about the scale of what's changed here, some reporting has described Porsche's profitability decline in stark terms, framing it as one of the sharpest drops the company has experienced in years.
Porsche hit a bumpy road in the first half due to falling sales and profits.
Whether you look at delivery numbers, regional sales performance, or margin figures, the picture is consistent. This is a company under real financial strain, making real financial decisions. And Bugatti happened to be one of the assets sitting on that balance sheet when the belt tightening started. That's an important thing to sit with because it reframes the entire story. This isn't Porsche losing faith in Bugatti as a brand or distancing itself from any kind of embarrassment. It's Porsche needing capital and needing to simplify its portfolio, and a 45% stake in a hypercar joint venture being one of the more logical things to sell off in that process. Bugatti, for its part, wasn't the problem here. It was simply positioned to be part of the solution to somebody else's problem. And this hasn't been an isolated cut either. Around the same period, Porsche has been quietly stepping back from several other side ventures that don't sit at the core of its main business, pulling back investment in battery production plans, scaling down projects outside its main lineup, and generally tightening its focus onto the sports cars and SUVs that actually pay the bills. Seen in that light, selling the Bugatti Rimac stake isn't a standalone decision about one brand at all. It's one line item in a much larger company-wide effort to get leaner, fast, while the broader market stays difficult. That context matters, because it means Bugatti's ownership shakeup isn't really about Bugatti. It's a side effect of Porsche fighting its own battles somewhere else entirely. Still, understanding why Porsche is leaving only answers half the question. The other half is who's actually stepping in to take its place. And that's where this story gets a lot less familiar and a lot more interesting. Bugatti's new power players. If Porsche walking away is the headline, the more important question underneath it is this: who exactly is picking up the stake they're leaving behind? And what does that change about how Bugatti actually gets run? The buyer here is a consortium led by HOF Capital, a New York-based investment firm, with Blue 5 Capital stepping in as the largest single investor in the group, alongside a handful of other institutional backers from both the US and Europe. This isn't another car company buying in. It isn't a rival manufacturer looking to fold Bugatti's technology into its own lineup. It's a group of financial investors, plain and simple, buying into a hypercar brand the same way they might buy into any other high-value asset they believe has room to grow. Once the deal closes, and it's expected to close before the end of 2026, pending the usual regulatory approvals, Rimac Group takes full operational control of Bugatti Rimac. That's a meaningful shift on its own. Instead of splitting ownership and decision-making with a massive, century-old industrial giant like Volkswagen or Porsche, Rimac Group, a company that, by comparison, is still relatively young, becomes the party actually steering the ship, with financial backers providing the capital rather than an industrial parent providing both money and manufacturing muscle. At the center of all of this remains Mate Rimac himself, the founder of Rimac Automobili.
Tell me about your focus. You're CEO of Rimac Automobili. You're based in Croatia.
And the driving force behind the joint venture from the start. He's not a career auto executive who was parachuted in to manage an existing brand. He built his own electric hypercar company from the ground up, before ending up in charge of one of the most storied names in the entire industry. That background matters here, because it shapes exactly what kind of company Bugatti is likely to become under this new structure. Less legacy industrial giant, more entrepreneurial engineering outfit, with serious financial backing behind it. But there's a real trade-off buried in this new arrangement, and it's worth being honest about it, instead of just celebrating the headline. A traditional industrial parent like Volkswagen or Porsche doesn't just provide money. It provides manufacturing scale, supplier relationships built up over decades, engineering resources that can be borrowed and shared across an entire group of brands, and a kind of patience that comes from being one small piece of a much larger, more diversified business. Financial investors operate differently. They're typically looking for a return within a defined time frame, and they don't come with a factory network or an engineering department attached. They come with capital, and with expectations about what that capital needs to produce. That doesn't mean this new structure is worse. In some ways, it could genuinely be better for a brand like Bugatti, freeing it from having to justify its existence inside a massive corporate portfolio built mostly around mainstream volume cars. But it is different, and different comes with real risk attached. Bugatti now has more room to define itself on its own terms than it's had in almost 30 years. It also has less of a safety net if something goes wrong along the way. It's also worth pointing out just how unusual this ownership makeup is for a company at this level of the industry. Most hypercar brands you can name are still tucked inside a larger manufacturer somewhere. Ferrari standing mostly alone, sure, but Lamborghini inside Volkswagen Group through Audi, Bentley in the same orbit, Pagani staying small and independent almost by necessity rather than by financial design. Bugatti now finds itself in a genuinely rare position. A brand with real engineering scale and real cultural weight. Backed primarily by private financial capital rather than an existing car manufacturer's balance sheet. Nobody quite knows what that experiment looks like 5 years down the road, because there isn't a clean precedent to point to and say, this is how it goes. Which makes the timing of everything else happening right now even more remarkable. Because while all of this ownership restructuring has been unfolding in boardrooms and regulatory filings,
the Bugatti brand will now fall under a new company owned by Croatian electric car startup Rimac and VW's Porsche brand.
Bugatti has also been quietly building something enormous back at its historic home in France. La Manufacture and the Tourbillon era. On July 2nd, 2026, Bugatti officially inaugurated a brand new production facility called La Manufacture, built directly on the grounds of its historic headquarters at Château Saint-Jean in Molsheim, France, the same site that's represented the home of Bugatti since the 1920s. This isn't some symbolic ribbon cutting for a facility that's mostly for show. La Manufacture spans roughly 3,245 square meters, and it was purpose-built for one specific job: producing Bugatti's new flagship hypercar, the Tourbillon. The building itself was constructed in under a year, designed with a low, spacious form, specifically so it would sit naturally within the historic landscape around the chateau, rather than looking like an industrial box dropped onto heritage grounds. Inside, it will handle exterior and interior pre-assembly, quality control, polishing, and painting, while final assembly continues at the existing atelier nearby. Altogether, the new facility raises Bugatti's total production capacity to as many as 200 vehicles a year, a meaningful jump for a brand that has always operated at extremely low volumes by design. And the car this entire facility exists to build is genuinely something else. The Tourbillon replaces the Chiron as Bugatti's new flagship, built around a naturally aspirated V16 engine developed with Cosworth.
Hybrid system with a V16. We had to make a mix between haute horlogerie, everything analog,
paired with 3 separate electric motors working alongside it. Combined, that hybrid setup produces somewhere around 1,800 horsepower. The price tag starts north of $4 million. Only 250 units will ever be built, and every single one of them has already been sold, before the car has even entered full production. Full-scale manufacturing is expected to begin around September 2026, meaning La Manufacture is opening its doors at almost the exact moment it needs to start earning its keep. Step back and look at the sequence of events here, because the timing genuinely doesn't look like an accident. Bugatti isn't opening this factory quietly in the background while everything else stays stable. It's opening it in the same handful of months that its entire ownership structure is being rebuilt from the ground up. Whoever is making decisions inside Bugatti right now clearly decided that uncertainty at the ownership level wasn't a reason to hit pause on physical expansion. If anything, it looks like the opposite, a deliberate signal that the brand intends to keep moving forward at full speed, new owners or not. There's something almost defiant about that choice, whether or not it was framed that way internally. A company that was genuinely worried about its future, or unsure of its direction, doesn't typically choose this exact moment to unveil a new factory built for its most ambitious car in a generation. It's the kind of move you make when you're trying to prove something, to customers, to investors, and maybe to yourself. The ceremony itself reflected that sense of occasion too. Bugatti brought together representatives of the French state and local institutions to mark the opening, alongside a filmed address from France's Minister Delegate for Industry, the kind of official recognition usually reserved for openings that matter well beyond one company's balance sheet. That's not just Bugatti throwing a party for its own employees. It's a statement, made publicly and on the record, that Molsheim intends to remain the beating heart of the brand, regardless of who owns the paperwork behind it. Which leads to the real question sitting underneath this entire story. Is this genuinely a sign of strength? Or is it a very expensive bet made right before the company had to prove it could survive without its longtime safety net? Bugatti's biggest gamble. Here's the honest version of where Bugatti stands right now. Stripped of all the marketing language, it has more freedom than it's had in nearly 3 decades, and it has less of a cushion to fall back on if that freedom doesn't work out the way everyone's hoping. The case for optimism is genuinely strong. Under Volkswagen and later Porsche, Bugatti always had to exist as one small, expensive project inside a much larger corporate portfolio built mostly around mainstream, high-volume vehicles. Every major decision, every ambitious idea had to be justified upward to executives ultimately focused on selling millions of ordinary cars, not hundreds of extraordinary ones. Under Rimac Group's full control, backed by financial investors rather than an industrial parent with its own competing priorities, Bugatti arguably has more room than ever to make decisions purely in service of what the brand actually wants to become, without having to fight for attention and resources inside somebody else's much bigger business. The Tourbillon is a pretty compelling early sign of what that freedom can produce. A naturally aspirated V16 in an era when almost every other manufacturer has abandoned big combustion engines entirely.
The Tourbillon is all analog, and this horsepower gauge actually has 2 needles, one for the electric motors and another for the V16 engine.
Is a genuinely unusual, almost stubborn engineering choice. The kind of decision that makes a lot more sense coming from a smaller, founder-driven company than from a committee inside a massive industrial group. The fact that all 250 units sold out before the car even reached full production suggests the market still has real appetite for that kind of uncompromising ambition, regardless of who technically owns the company behind it. But freedom cuts both ways, and it's worth being honest about the other side of this too. Financial investors are not the same as an industrial parent, and that distinction matters enormously the moment something goes wrong. If a project runs over budget, or a car takes years longer to develop than planned, an industrial parent like Volkswagen has historically been able to absorb that cost as part of a much larger business. A consortium of financial backers, focused on generating a return within a defined window, may not have the same patience or the same appetite for absorbing an expensive surprise. Bugatti is now operating without the deep-pocketed safety net that made some of its riskiest, most extravagant projects possible in the first place. There's also a quieter, longer-term question hanging over all of this. What happens to a brand's identity when the people setting its direction shift from an engineering-driven industrial company to a group whose first priority is, quite reasonably, a return on investment? That doesn't automatically mean anything bad. Mate Rimac himself built an entire company from nothing before ending up here.
We are now at our new production line, but no, this is not the Rimac campus. The campus is actually still in construction. It's moving ahead really fast, but it's a huge project. It's the biggest building.
And there's a real argument that founder-driven leadership, even with financial backers rather than an industrial parent, can produce more focused, more daring decisions than a committee-run division ever could. But it is a different kind of pressure than what Bugatti has operated under for almost 30 years. And different pressure tends to produce different outcomes, for better or worse. It's a bit like watching a talented kid finally move out of their parents' house. There's genuine excitement in that, more freedom, more room to make your own calls, nobody looking over your shoulder second-guessing every decision. But there's also, for the first time, real financial exposure if things go wrong, with nobody automatically stepping in to cover the gap. Bugatti is living through the corporate version of that exact moment right now, on a scale measured in hundreds of millions of dollars instead of a first apartment lease. So this is really the test Bugatti is walking into right now. whether it chose the timing deliberately or simply had no choice but to keep moving forward regardless. A new factory, a sold-out flagship hypercar built around an engine most of the industry has already walked away from. A completely new ownership structure, with no direct industrial parent standing behind it for the first time in its modern history. All of it landing in the same few months, with no real way to know yet which side of that freedom versus exposure equation is going to define what comes next. So where does this actually leave Bugatti? A 28-year relationship with Volkswagen is over, not because of scandal, but because Porsche needed cash and Bugatti was on the balance sheet. In its place, a New York-led investor group, full control handed to Rimac, and a brand new factory built for a hypercar already sold out before production even starts. More freedom than Bugatti's had in decades, and less of a safety net if things go wrong. Nobody knows yet which side wins. So tell me, is this Bugatti's boldest era or its riskiest gamble? Drop your take below and subscribe. This story's only just getting started.